My name is Rachele Brancaleoni, and I'm the chair of the Including Annual Workshop. I'm from the Catholic University of Sacredot in Rome, that is the partner, one of the partner of the Including project. These are the general rules, so the meeting will be recorded and it will be uploaded on the Including website. You can ask questions anytime using the chat, but then they will be addressed during the Q&A sessions. Please keep your mic and camera off unless you're asking differently. We might take some pictures. So if you don't wish to appear, please you leave your camera off. And then an evaluation questionnaire will be sent after this webinar, after this meeting. And this will help us in improving our webinars. So please answer to the questionnaire. It will take just a few minutes. These are the objectives of this meeting. We have three main topics. The first one is an open issue on nuclear security, and they will focus on the international activity, the management of a radiological crime scene, and the problems in the medical aspects. The second topic deals with a very recent events where radiation monitoring has been the key for in assessing the possible onset of a radiological emergency. And the third one is a possible use of assets and capability of the RN domain in the countering the COVID-19. This is the agenda. So, well, I invite Luigi to take the floor.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this open session of the first Including Annual Workshop. So this workshop was initially planned in physical presence in the NEA Center of Bologna and with a duration of 2 days. But for obvious reason, we are having this workshop in online modality and with a 2-hour duration. And so next slide, please. For the ones that are not familiar with our project, with Including, I just recall briefly the basic of the project. Including is in some way the acronym for Innovative Cluster for Radiological and Nuclear Emergencies. So it is clear from the title of the project that we are hitting the innovation in the specific sector of radiological and nuclear preparedness. So we mean essentially the prevention and the response phase to a radiological and nuclear emergencies. So we are 15 partners from 10 different member states. The project has a duration of 5 years, started on August 2019, so it will end in the summer of 2024. It is a coordination and support action with a typical budget for this kind of project of little bit more than 3.5 million euros. And our consortium connects research centers, university, frontline operators in nuclear security, first responders, industry, and small and medium enterprises. And we have a very good coverage of the European territory from the south to north, from the east to west. Next slide, please. We have 4 main objectives in our project. The first one is to assess how the scenarios leading to radiological and nuclear emergencies are evolving. And for scenarios, we mean both unintentional and unintentional scenarios. And to assess how the training programs of member states are updated to these evolving threats. So our main questions, which we would like to give an answer is, are we training or yesterday threats or not? The second objective is the development of federation. Federation is a mixed training experimentation environment that is widely distributed across the geographical domain of the consortium, and with a very important technological dimension that is made by all the resources that are made available, that are shared by the different partners of the consortium that generate the federation. Objective 3 is the development of a centralized management tools for the remote booking and the utilization of the several resources in the federation. It is a result that is built upon the achievement in a previous European project that was coordinated by the University of Athens, that is our partner. So essentially, we are upgrading, we are bringing to a next level this concept of federation and of the management tools. The final objective is the organization of joint actions in the federation facilities. Joint actions are exercise and trials that have the scope to validate the previous point. So the scenarios, for instance, are based on the how to come from objective one. So let me say that objectives 2, 3, and 4 have been the subject of a webinar that the project organized on 21 of September, so of last month. And this webinar, this event is available on our project website, so you can access the gallery of the video and to look at this webinar where point 2, 3, and 4 are detailed. Today, we are essentially carrying on activities on objective 1. We are putting our magnifying lens on some specific aspect, as Raquel told before, with a very distinguished panel of speakers. So next slide, please. Okay, so it is the project will organize 5 different workshops during its duration. This workshop is online, but was, as I said, previously planned in Bologna. The next is planned for next year in June in Athens, in Greece, and we hope that will be finally held in physical presence. Then we will have workshop in Budapest, Porto, and in Poland, in Warsaw. The scope of the workshop is to bring together stakeholders in the sector of radiological and nuclear emergencies for discussing hot topics and to steer the future project activities. We are like blacksmiths working the hot iron. The hot iron are nuclear security, radiological emergency teams. So this to foster collaboration of including with other projects and to create essentially an European forum on these thematics. So most of the time, so always, for this time it has not been possible, the workshop is organized after a joint action. So the workshop most of the time will be the real possibility to discuss the outcome of the joint action, as I explained before. So from my side, that's all. We have a very dense schedule, very interesting presentation. So I leave the floor to the speakers. But first of all, I would like to thank, obviously, all the speakers for their participation, for their contribution to this event. I would like to thank the main organizers of the events, that are Rachele Brancaleoni, Monica Cimino, and Monica Manosex. And I would like to apologize if there is not a correct balance in the gender in the panel of speakers. I promise to be more committed to take care of this aspect in the next event of the project. So Rachele, I leave back to you.
Thank you, Luigi. And well, these are our 3 panels. We have the first panel that is dedicated to global nuclear security, to open issues in nuclear security. And our first speaker will be Franca Padoani from ENEA. And nuclear security is about the prevention, detection, and response to criminal acts involving nuclear and radioactive material. It's a global concern that is confronted with several international legal instruments. With the presentation of Dr. Padoani, we try to better understand where do we stand. She's a nuclear engineer working at ENEA since 1980. She is now in charge of the Laboratory for Design and Technical Support for Nuclear Safety, Security and Sustainability. She is part of many working groups and committees, including G7 Nuclear Security and Safety and Security Group, Global Partnership in the Nuclear and Radiological Security Sub-Working Group, global initiatives to combat nuclear terrorism, Nuclear Security Guidance Committee Network, and many others. Please, Franca Padoani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rachele. And now I switch off my camera so you can concentrate on the presentation, not on the bookshelf. And I will start my presentation. First of all, I'm honored to start, at least with the right gender balance combination. And I will start this presentation saying that I will deal with 3 questions. Next slide. Global nuclear security, how strong it is? What are the hot topics in nuclear security? And pandemic nuclear security, what is the impact? Or at least, what can we say at this point after 6 months or more since it's a beginning in Europe? Next one. First question, how strong is nuclear security? I leave the former US Secretary of Energy, Moniz, to answer to this question. He was Secretary of Energy during the Obama administration and is now chair of the Nuclear Threat Initiative. And his words are coming from this event that took place at the end of July on the presentation of the Nuclear Threat Initiative Nuclear Security Index. I will show you in a moment. So, what is he saying in answer to this question? No, yeah, thanks. Nuclear security progress has slowed in the past 2 years. Domestic nuclear security regulation remain weak, and there are major gaps in the nuclear security architecture. Next. Regarding the nuclear security at domestic level, no countries have eliminated more nuclear weapon usable material since 2016. The regulatory requirements are not comprehensive, and the measure to address a human factor that is very critical factor, particularly for insider threat prevention and safety and security culture, really fall short. And the cyber security regulation are not in a better position. They are not keeping pace with the cyber threat. Plus, there are even more countries that are planning a nuclear program without being ready or being, let's say, they have an uneven preparedness to be, let's say, to use a kind word. Next one. And also looking at the radioactive sources security situation is not better. We start from an international architecture that is already weak, because much weaker than for nuclear material. Plus, many countries are not implementing this weak architecture properly. And so in some cases, they are lacking basic security requirement. And also the efforts to substitute radioactive sources with alternative technologies are not so widespread as it would be advisable. Next one. Why I started with the NTI Nuclear Security Index? Because it's probably one of the best instruments we have now to see trends in nuclear security. It showed the ranking of nuclear security worldwide. This is its 5th edition, and it's produced every 2 years since 2012 by the NTI together with the Economist Intelligence Unit. 2012 is 2 years after the first Nuclear Security Summit, and the first edition was produced just before the second Nuclear Security Summit. The process of the Nuclear Security Summit was concluded in 2016. And every 2 years, just before the next summit, this index was published to provide an idea of how nuclear security was improving or not. And it's not intended to give ranking to say you're good, you're bad. But really the scope is to make a recommendation to strengthen nuclear security, to see the gaps, and also to see the trend, evaluate the progress against certain elements that were considered in the evaluation. You will find everything on this index at this site. Is wonderful in terms of, let's say, test, many ways to see the data. So you can play with them as you want. I will show you some examples. No, can you go back? Yeah. On the right, you see this pie, and because the index is divided in 3. One part is on the left is considering the risk of theft. And there are 2 groups of countries, 22 that have 1 kilogram or more of weapon usable nuclear material. And all the other countries that at least, not all, but at least 154. Then on the right, there are the countries that have a risk of sabotage greater than a risk of, let's say, radiological consequences that might be severe in case of sabotage. There are 47 countries, and they are the country with nuclear power reactor, research reactors that greater than a certain power, reprocessing facilities, spent fuel, or let's say some nuclear facility that can create a risk if there is an accident. Next one. So let's see the trend. These 3 graphs are showing these 3 groups of countries. On the right, there are the risk of theft for material for countries with material and without material. On the right, there is the sabotage. And in blue, there are the countries with increasing in score. So the number of countries increasing in score. The orange is the number of countries decreasing in score. You can see that this is the first time that the number of a country decreasing in score is increasing, while the number of the countries increasing in score, so it means making their national regime more secure, is decreasing. And this is not definitely a good sign. Next one. Why? Why there is this trend? Might be because it reflects the end of the Nuclear Security Summit process. Let's go next. I leave again the former Secretary of Energy Monix to give an answer that I agree completely with his view. This is why I leave is a more important voice to give this answer. Security improvements captured by this index between 2012 and 2018 reflected the work of the summits. And since the summit process ended in 2016, no comparable cooperative global effort has emerged to replace the summit's role in galvanizing countries to take a bold, ambitious action. This is a problem that is discussed in all fora dealing with nuclear security. We see all over the world a decreasing interest among government institutions about, let's say, politicians, decreasing interest on nuclear security. And this, of course, is showing in this trend. Next one. Let's play a little bit with the ranking. These are the top 20 among the country scoring on theft and sabotage. We can see that the NTI highlighted the first position of Australia for theft and sabotage among the countries that have a certain amount of nuclear material, and from the other, New Zealand and Sweden are ranking pretty well, while Pakistan is highlighted because it was the country that make the most evident sign of improving its national security regime. Next one. Now I looked at the partner countries that are part of the Including project. They belong to the three groups. Of course, some of them are in one, some are in the other. And it's not so important, the number, the score is not, again, as I'm saying, a matter of saying good or bad, but to see where we can improve. Let's see, next slide. Here I looked at the countries that have a weapon usable material. Among the partner in Including, there is Germany, Italy, and France that fell in this category. And I compared them with the European Union. Of course, only the countries that are in this category that have this material. And so you can see more or less if the average, if we are behaving better or worse than the average. It's just to give an idea, it doesn't say much. To have a better explanation of why is this situation, you have to read the index, but this is not my scope. It's just to have, let's say, the flavor of what is the situation. Let's see the other group of countries that have, no, this is also how you can see the data in the index. You can play, as I said, there are Excel tables that you can use as you want. And this is the comparison of Italy versus the Europe group, and you can see where we are better than the average or where we are in similar. Next one. Looking at the country without weapon usable nuclear material, here it's divided in two. So the upper part and the lower half, they are two different groups, because I could not compare at the same time the 7 countries with Europe. So I had to divide them. So there is Austria, Portugal, Greece, then Finland, Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania. And you can see again that the comparison against the average of the other European countries. Next one. This is again for the country with nuclear facility that with risk of sabotage. You can see again the comparison. Next one. For the first time in the 2020 index, there is an assessment on the radioactive source security. Is not ranking, they are assessment given country by country. There is a country profile that describe the situation. But I just wanted to give you, let's say, a snapshot of the average situation in the European Union regarding the national measure. The blue part, the darker part, is bad, let's say. If everything is fine, the color is lighter. So you can see that it's not too bad, the situation. The only weaker point is regarding the registry of the radioactive sources. But in general, situation is not too bad, even if it is remain one of the higher risk. Next one. So to conclude this part on the index, as I said, I encourage you to go and read the report because it's very interesting to have an idea or to better understand what is the general situation and if you're interested to see your country and to see what are the points that might be worthwhile to improve, this is a nice reading. So let's look at what is hot in. Can you go back at what is hot now? There are many issues that are hot in nuclear security. I'm just focusing on two. That is the CPPNM review conference and the guidance on the IAEA nuclear security guidance. Next one. Oops, I see I'm a little bit slow. Okay. Again, from the index on the right, you can see the countries that have 0 score or full score in a number of topics. These topics are all included in the Convention of Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and Nuclear Facilities, apart from cybersecurity, that you see is one of the critical points. According to some experts, in reality, even if it's not explicitly mentioned, cybersecurity is implicitly included in the convention. But this is an issue that also will be discussed at the review conference. Next one. This review conference that will take place in 2021 is not yet, the date is not yet certain because of the COVID. It will be an opportunity to revive this political attention that we have seen is lacking now. And then will be, of course, a forum to share what we learned or not learned, best practices. And it's really important because it will be an opportunity to decide to hold the regular RevCon, because the amendment of 2005 of this convention require only 5 years after the entry into force, that is the review conference in 2021. And after that, if nothing is decided, there will be none. But it's important to have more because it will be a way to encourage the accountability of the countries and also to adapt to evolving threats like cyber or other that are coming, are already there, and also to changes in technology. Next one. The other point is regarding the nuclear security series that and particularly the 4 documents that are at the top of the hierarchy: fundamental, and the 3 recommendations. Recommendation on nuclear material and facilities, radioactive material and facility, and material out of regulatory control. It is a document since many years are being discussed if they should be revised or not to revise, why they should be. You can see from the number. Fundamental is number 20, and the recommendation are number 13, 14, 15. So it means they were produced after many other guidance and guideline at a lower level were already produced. And so inevitably, there are inconsistencies, terminology is not always harmonized, and certain parts are weak. For instance, computer security at the time these documents were developed around 10 years ago was not such a strong issue as it is now. So discussion is underway to what to do with them. And there are different views from member states, from no revision to full revision. So most probably we will arrive at a limited revision without changing scope and structure. But the most critical is the document on recommendation on nuclear material and nuclear facilities, because it includes also the INFCIRC 225 revision 5, that in some way the implementing document of the convention of the CPPNM. And so many countries don't want to change this document because it's the base for their legal system and also bilateral agreement in international cooperation. Next one. So just a couple of slides. What is the effect of pandemic on nuclear security? Let's go. Looking from IAEA special position that they have a very broad view. First of all, I have to say that the agency was very proactive and started soon to look at the effect of the pandemic on safety and security within the Nuclear Safety Committee and the Nuclear Security Guidance Committee. And in this last committee, discussion is underway whether to provide or not additional guidance to take care of this, of what happened during pandemic. According to the agency, what were the effects? At the level of nuclear power plants, there were no unplanned shutdown because of it. And also for a research reactor, both for research or radioisotope production, there were no particular problem. Of course, there were issues. There were delays, rescheduling, reprogramming, but let's say no critical issue so far. If a situation continues, it has to be seen, but so far there were no problem. There were, however, some problem expressed by regulatory bodies on radioactive sources. Next. And the agency made a survey in May and then again during the summer among more than 100 regulatory bodies, mainly on the safety, but there were comments also on security of radiation sources during the pandemic. What were the risks highlighted? Reduced regulatory oversight, the risk of financial failures of the user of the country that could bring to a diminished safety and security of the sources, particularly on the disused radioactive sources. Their decommissioning is very expensive. And therefore, the number of orphan sources might increase. Next one. And also there were a number of side events dealing with the effect of a pandemic on nuclear security. So I just give a few comments. I followed a number of them. So MPP, as I said, have managed to keep operating safely. Problem, but the nuclear facility has shown to be adapting and also ramping up their cyber security defense. Cyber security is really a critical point during a situation like this one for a number of reasons. And it's important to study more the effects of pandemic in a simultaneous radiation emergency. So in some way to look at CBRN as a whole. And one example that was given is the requirement on confinement versus evacuation might conflict, as many others. And also maintaining information security among competent authorities and license holders could be a problem. Next one. But the human factor is one, if not the key factor. And it's important to develop a corona culture, said one expert. In this case, a corona, but might be another, in future, another type of culture. Anyway, we need to be ready. And we need to invest more on emergency preparedness and response. And for that, training is essential, but it must be a regular training and realistic and mainly adaptable to increase the resilience. Someone pointed out that the risk of complacency and the lack of vigilance might increase. Particularly, there are too many rules and steps. So there is a risk of COVID fatigue that we should not underestimate. My last slide. Oh no, I forgot this one. But we all know that virtual can be beautiful or not. So it can be democratic, inclusive, but if you have a good internet line, otherwise it's not. And lack of face-to-face meeting made networking and connecting among people very difficult, or more difficult at least. And there are issues with platform, though new technologies are developing. Really, next one, that is dealing with including. From all the comment, from what I heard and read, I extrapolated 3 points that I think should be considered in what we are doing in the project. And so that we need to invest more on emergency preparedness and response, considering a combination of and then training, again I repeat, realistic and adaptable, because the key word is flexibility. And so what we produced should really go in this direction. And with that, I finished. Thank you very much. And sorry for being too long.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Armenio Liceia, and he will talk about a site associated with a nuclear security event might contain evidences of criminal activities involving nuclear and or radioactive material. Such a site is called radiological crime scene, and its management demands specific provisions. With the presentation of Armenio Liceia, we are going to listen about this specific issue. Armenio is a Portuguese police EOD CBRN E unit acting commander. He is a CBRN security manager and also a good friend of mine. Please, Armenio, the floor is yours. Armenio?
And now, I think you are listening.
Yeah, now we can hear you and we can see you too. Please.
Okay, I'm going to switch off my camera for you to be focused on the presentation. Good afternoon to all of you, online participants and speakers. First of all, I want to thank you the opportunity and thank you, Raquel, to helping me during the presentation. I'm going to, next one, please. I'm going to briefly speak about just 5 topics because crime scene management is a wide title and lots of things can be discussed about this, and in 15 minutes I'm only able to introduce these topics that I think they are very important to when we are talking about crime scene management. And for that reason, and starting immediately from the framework to radiological crime scene, next one. This topic, I have it here just to briefly discuss the process that we usually use to ensure safety, secure, and also efficient operate at the radiological crime scene. That's why I think we need to keep in mind that when we are talking about a crime or a crime scene, it's not the same when we are talking about a radiological crime scene, as you can see on the slide. That's why I put it here to distinguish since the beginning. Next one. But what is different from other crime scenes? And we must start from here. It's not so different, but we need to deal with and distinguish between time and distance as a tool to be safe, and at the same time use shield as another tool. But sometimes we forget that we need to control the radionuclide contamination when we are collecting some evidence. And also the degree to which of these factors also will apply in the scenario will depend on the material that is presented on the scene. Next one. The same regarding to the required personnel. The titles for the positions may be different between several nations, agencies, and so on. But in my opinion, the roles and responsibilities for each position will remain the same. Of course, additional positions may be required, and also additional roles and responsibilities may apply for any of these positions, depending, of course, of the nature of the scene, national or local practices. And of course, the same is referred to additional positions, not only for personnel, but for the positions. And this is just an overview of the framework. I want to focus now in the conduct of operations in a briefly way. Next one. And I think the conduct of operations start with the scene control procedures. And these procedures are a recommended set of actions that should be performed during the process of approaching the scene. And of course, this includes immediately scene control procedures, the planning of initial entry, establishment of control areas, and of course, the command post. But focusing on the scene control procedures, next one. Sorry. Yes. Regarding the scene control procedures, they involve 3 main areas. So they are undertaken to manage the access into, within, and out of a radiological crime scene. And these 3 areas that I'm just underlining here, they are the scene, the perimeter security, the traffic control, and the scene access control. And why? Because the central aims of the scene is to reduce the hazards, not only for the people that need to act inside, but also for people that don't need to go inside. Next one. But all these 3 areas they have similarities and variables that we can find in all of them. And we should discuss in each of these areas, for example, and I have some in the slide, the common hazard risk assessment. Which risks are assessed? For example, we should be worried about any risk to health and safety of the public as well as personnel conducting the operations at the scene. Also, the risk reduction procedures, safety procedures to all of these people that I was speaking earlier. And of course, we should clearly designate the areas and keep in mind that the scene configuration is not the same during all the scenarios. Next one. For example, this scenario is seen from the IAEA. You can see that control areas should be established and designated within the operational area. Access control should also be applied to prevent unauthorized entry, because we must have the total control of the scene. Because if you change just one small thing on that scene, you can destroy all crime scene management, and all the evidence will be destroyed in court. Next one. On the same line, we should keep in mind that the extent and configuration of any hazard control area depends on several factors. Usually we speak about radiation levels, precipitation, wind conditions, but there are several other ones. And the control areas need to be modified in response to developments at the scene. As I said earlier, this is an ongoing process and we must be able to change it all the time. The same, next slide please, when we are talking about the perimeters, because the exact perimeters of the designated operational, tactical and hazard control areas must be established to facilitate security and scene control. Here we need to speak also about security, not only about safety. However, we should keep in mind that evidence in these kind of scenarios, they have two roles: evidence and safety of the people included on the operation. But in focus here on this slide, you can see that the tactical area should contain the local command post and is where tactical management of resources for the conduct of operation is prepared. On the other hand, the operational area is a designated geographical area which represents the maximum extent of the area needed to support the management of radiological crime scene, into and from which access must be controlled. And with this small overview, I want to go to the next slide and speak a little bit about forensic by itself. And forensic evidence management in these kind of scenarios differs from the conventional scene in the following two important aspects. The first one is that all evidence should be checked for radiological contamination with radionuclides, and of course the other one, nuclear or other radioactive material present at the scene, should be collected to contribute both as evidence in the court, but to perform a risk reduction for all the people that can be exposed to radiation levels. Next one. But this is not easy. We can have transient, trace evidence, microscopic evidence, and several other ones. We can stay here for 1 hour discussing just kind of evidence. But here I want to underline that collection should focus on information or items of evidence that generate rapid investigative leads for law enforcement. Not just to render safe all the scenario. That's why we should keep in mind that in these scenarios, all kind of evidences will have special needs, as contamination check recording, dose rate survey, and precautionary measures for the treatment that this evidence will have, even administrative or operational. Next one. Also, the labeling of items, it's also one activity that we must perform during the management of a scene like that one. And in forensic management, the labeling is maybe one of the most important activities. And because they have, when they are removed from the radiological crime scene, they have their own evidence recovery bag with just one unique identifier, and the point is that they should be placed under the chain of custody since the time of collection. The chain of custody starts when we are collecting the evidence and not only after the contamination or contamination control area. And this is the topic here because as we are going to see on the next slide, we will have different kinds of evidences with different kind of treatment. And this chain of custody should remain until it is no longer needed, and at the point that it should be disposed in line of applicable laws in the proper scenario. This is the this have a straight connection with the next slide, please, with the packaging. And that's why I was talking about different kind of evidences. As you can see on the slide, you have radioactive materials, contaminated evidence, and low radiation evidence. Sometimes low radiation evidence is called like other items of evidence because the radiation level is accepted as normal, and you can treat this kind of evidence as normal evidence in the normal scenario. This is important because all of them will have a final administrative and operational routine that we must control since the beginning until the disposal of the evidence. And of course, if we are, next one, if we are just managing the scene, we are just collecting, labeling, packaging, and now we need to release the scene. And how or when can we release the scene? We must keep in mind two aspects. The first one is that once the collection of the evidence has been completed, the scene may be released, but only from the law enforcement point of view, because we cannot forget that any decision to release the scene for unrestricted use should be advised by the radiological criteria from the competent authority. Because one thing is crime scene management, the other thing is render safe all the scenario. And of course, when we are talking about forensics, we must have all the time an after-action review. And why? Because it's very important, because it's a key to understand the lesson learned and enhance the performance in maybe a future intervention. Hope not, but it can happen. And like this, okay, it's quite simple, it seems, but it is simple if we can have the right level of preparedness. Next slide. And to have the right level of preparedness, at least we must record that we should have two main poles. And here I'm just underlining the interagency arrangements and plans and procedures. Regarding plans and procedures, it's very important that all authorities get involved in, because in the management of a radiological crime scene, a comprehensive national response plan will be needed. And this plan also must predict the possibility to international cooperation at any level, because one incident with radiological material, it's easy to go across our country borders and so on. Speaking about interagency arrangements, I have just some examples that this arrangement should cover as minimum as the functions of previous one. Please, sorry. I'm just giving examples of interagency arrangements and just, for example, functions of each agency, responsibilities, the authority of each one in the country and outside the country, allocation of resources, coordination, logistics. Sometimes we forget the logistic, and of course, training, drills and exercises is a big topic inside the interagency region. And because I'm running against the time, 15 minutes, it's not so long. And at last but not least, I want to just give you, next slide, I chose two publications from IAEA because they go straight to this point about the response procedures, declaration of nuclear event, and especially the 22G about nuclear forensic examination. My presentation is supported by this publication, and I think it's they are two good documents for further consultation, because as I said, this probably will be an event out of our country, out of our borders, and we will need help from all countries and authorities abroad. And with this, I'm finishing my presentation. It was quite fast, but 15 minutes. I think I'm inside my scheduled time. Hoping to have contributed for the discussion, and I'm at your disposal for any questions or not. Thank you, Raquel. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Armenio. So the next one speaker is Daniele Gui. He would talk about the role of the hospital in RN emergencies, since the role of these hospitals is complex, and he will analyze gaps and needs related to healthcare system in such a scenario, starting from past incidents. He is an associate professor of surgery, former director of the emergency surgery department at the Policlinico Gemelli Hospital, and is fellow of the AAST and FACS. Professor Gui, the floor is yours. Professor Gui, I think we have some issues with your mic. Can you hear me?
Okay. Sorry. Oh. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. My talk will concern the medical aspects of the radionuclear emergency, and in particular, the hospital's commitment. My hospital is Policlinico Gemelli Hospital in Rome. It represents a large hospital with an emergency department that treats 100,000 patients a year and is committed to the acute care. Next. In this presentation, I'll mention the main types of radionuclear accident first, then I will broadly touch the medical organization on the scene, then I will describe the organization within the hospital with regards to the surge capacity, highlighting the weaknesses, and concluding with priorities of what must be done to overcome the weaknesses. Next. Atomic weapon or a major accident in a nuclear plant are out of the scope of this presentation. However, studies indicate that in these events, the vast majority of hospitals in the area would be put in a position not to be able to operate. On the other hand, the possibility of a so-called dirty bomb has often been advanced, especially in the context of a terroristic action. It combines radioactive contamination with the traumatic damage of conventional explosives. There is a belief that the risk from radioactive material are less serious than the actual explosion, at least for the surrounding people. So we probably would observe trauma and contaminated wounds. Radioactive fragments could also be found inside the body of victims, and these present a further problem from a medical point of view. They should be removed early in an operating environment because they are a possible source of large quantities of penetrating radiation, and also they can be a danger for the healthcare personnel. Next. Let's look at an accident from dispersal devices. Radiological contamination in this case can involve large areas or a large number of people. If it is hidden, it might be difficult to identify, at least at the beginning. Also, this type of event can involve the hospital emergency department in a massive way. As you will see later, if the hospital is alerted, it can prepare for a correct management. If not, we can assist to an overcrowding. The prolonged exposure to penetrating radiation, as in the last box, can lead to the presentation of victims with severe effects of radiation sicknesses. Also, in this case, it is crucial that the healthcare personnel knows what is dealing with. This diagram describes the actions of medical interest that are carried out at the site of the event, provided that the nature of incident is known. The red area is usually off limits for healthcare personnel. In the yellow area, medical triage must select first the most severely compromised victims, especially for possible concomitant traumatic injuries. From our point of view, the general rule is that victims with impaired vital functions, on the right on the picture, must be stabilized before being treated for decontamination or moved for transport into the hospital. Victims only contaminate on the left, and so with normal life functions, must be decontaminated if possible at the site and then transferred to the hospital. In general, this on-site organization follows well-defined medical standard operative procedures. Next. This slide, on the contrary, summarizes the flow management into the hospital. The blue box refers precisely to the intra-hospital activities. After the alert has been given from the field and identification of the radionuclide possibly carried out, the hospital starts the emergency plan and prepares for triage and decontamination at the entrance of the hospital, ideally outside the hospital. Then the victim proceeds to the clean area inside the hospital for administrative admission or transfer. This is the flow, and the protocol is well defined and rational. Unfortunately, the real life things are frequently different. Ideally, the emergency department should be set up to have a contaminated area for patients too seriously injured to undergo decontamination. The entrance to the contaminated room, optimally, is from outside of the hospital, where radiological triage take place, dividing non-contaminated people from contaminated victims. Where a contaminated room does not exist, as in the bottom of the picture, a clean hospital stretcher goes out to meet the ambulance. The patient can be transferred onto the hospital stretcher with a sheet opened on it, wrapped up in the cloth sheet, and brought into the hospital. But it is necessary to cover the floor with plastic sheets to reduce the contamination and favor the decontamination. Next. This is an example of a red area prepared to stabilize the patient with instruments and devices that make it similar to an operating room. In this area, the treatment of a critically ill patient takes place, including even surgical treatment if necessary, and then the decontamination. The access to this hot zone is controlled by means of doors or ropes. Any personnel and supplies should not leave this area without a radiological survey. And covering all equipment with disposable sheets simplifies the cleanup. It's also necessary to prepare containers for the collection of solid and liquid radioactive waste. Next. All the procedures follow the activation of the hospital surge plan. Hospital is a complex system where organization, technology, and caretakers interact everywhere and in every moment. The radiological emergency strongly increases all critical issues, as you can understand. On the picture, from the side of patients, imagine the conflicts in between the current patients during ongoing care and the new arrivals. The new arrivals need an assistance complicated also by experienced operators. Be aware that a radiological accident can be a mass event. In this case, it can overwhelm a hospital in 1 or 2 hours. The ability to manage a sudden influx of patients can be analyzed as problem of staff, system, and structure. Next. But for the moment, let me show 2 examples of real incidents and unforeseen consequences. One of the first reactions to prepare the hospital surge is surely the decision to free many beds for the incoming victims. We must consider that hospitals are always full of fragile patients, partially in the wards or partially staying in the emergency department for active urgent diseases. To make an example, consider that usually in my hospital, over 100 patients are present in emergency department. The paradoxical experience of Fukushima event exemplifies how this decision of massive release of beds is controversial. The hospitals in the site were forced to transfer many conventional admitted patients because incoming victims had been estimated in large excess. As an effect of this, more than 50 hospital patients died because of interruption of care during transportation to other hospitals. Facts suggest the danger of unprepared evacuation. Solution is simple but costly. First, to be prepared with a strong exercise plan, and second, have many deployable assets. Next. This case is the opposite of Fukushima case from the medical point of view. The story is about a very delayed medical diagnosis because the evidence of radiological accident was lacking and doctors were largely unprepared to recognize symptoms of radiological exposure. In a few words, the diagnosis was missed for 2 weeks after the accident. It's evident that here we have a failure of society because of the incapacity to decommission radioactive materials. But more important for us is the failure of the medical system and the hospital system to recognize unusual symptoms, so missing the opportunity to make the diagnosis. Next. Returning to the 4S, in the hospital response to a mass incident, here there are some issues about staff. Focus is on personnel. Hospital personnel is surely armed with goodwill, but is far from the context of radionuclear emergency because they never had to do with it. Training is rare, and the turnover of trained personnel is very high in emergency department. Personnel is terrified of contamination, even if the risk is low, but the PPI must be done, obviously. Frequently, nuclear specialists are not in hospital on 24-hour shifts, and support personnel, as psychologists, is not prepared. In the literature, it is widely recognized the importance of training for hospital staff. The lack of knowledge and the consequent fear about medical consequences could affect significantly the treatment of injured or contaminated patients. Next. Some instruments and devices for hospital use in case of a radionuclear emergency are summarized here. In the real life, the vast majority of hospitals lack completely this stuff in the emergency department. If an accident is notified, they could only look for it quickly in the radiotherapy department of the hospital, where one of two detectors may be present. The correct procedures suggest almost 4 or 6 Geiger tubes to be at hand. Personal electronic dosimeters are even more rare in the emergency department. Next. Hospital as a system also should be resilient. If this is true in every situation, in radiological accident, it is even more so. The hospital disaster plan, or PEMAF or PEIMAF, usually does not consider radiological accident, or when considered, the plan is entirely theoretical, meaning that it is not exercised. Tabletops and live exercises could ameliorate the preparation, but they are demanding, and in particular, the live ones are expensive. Protocols on how to handle complex victims, for example, contaminated and traumatized patients, to be taken to operatory room, are generally lacking or known only at a theoretical level, not in detail, not experienced. Next. And what about the structure? The hospitals are not designed for radionuclear emergencies. The majority are all the infrastructures, as on the left, and don't have spaces or facilities, as in the map. The picture on the right shows, on the contrary, my hospital. This is a little better. It was built in 1960 and has fortunately some space near the emergency department, where the tent for decontamination and other facilities can be prepared in short time. In the picture, some items of the live exercise we did in the past. Important assets that the structure must have are triage site outside the emergency department and the contamination facility. Dirty areas for radionuclear casualty treatment in the emergency department. Operating rooms, wards with planning entrance, exit points, and patient transport routes different from those of normal patients. Means to collect waste, water from decontamination, and body fluids from people who have internal contaminations. Sewage waters must be treated. Morgue or any other storage area for corpses must different from the usual morgue. Next. So, at the conclusion of this quick analysis of medical problems when facing a radiological accident in a hospital in particular, I think it is worth focusing on some shortcomings rather than demanding the solution of all the potential problems. We can't change physical structures. New untrained staff will always be there. Staff will always be missing, etc. From the 4S, we have to select, prioritize. Which one to prioritize with the aim to obtain significant goals without major financial burden. They are, in my opinion, education and awareness, availability of PPI and radiation detectors, disaster plan, comprehensive of radionuclear plan, training, decontamination units. And then remember the 6 Ps, where the last 3 are practice, practice, and practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gui. Now it's time for the question and answer session. So I would like to introduce this session with 2 really interesting comments. One from Nigel Totti from IAEA, from the Division of Nuclear Security, highlighted the fact that NSS number 15 on material out of regulatory control is now in the process of being reviewed. So no major changes identified as needed by experts, just some updates needed to align the document with the older documents mentioned and updated with some information. And I saw that also Franca Padoani answered that, highlighting the fact that NSS 13 seems to be more problematic than the 15. So however, the decision will be taken in the next NSCG in November. Then we have a comment from John Buchanan from Interpol's Radiological and Nuclear Terrorism Prevention Unit, saying that when recovering evidence and considering chain of evidence, it is also important to consider who is authorized by the court and the individual country legislation to recover evidence for prosecution purposes. And I think we cannot agree more on this. And then we have a question from Antonella Cavallo from DG ECO. Is there consensus in the EU on plans and safety measures when it comes to radiological and nuclear emergencies? I don't know who of the speakers want to reply to this question. I don't know, Franca or probably our coordinator, Luigi. Please, the floor is yours.
So I may try, I'm Luigi, I may try to give an answer from the R&D perspective. So we are a project of research and development, essentially, which brings together practitioners, stakeholders of all kinds. It's true that action like including are supported by the European Commission to give an answer to this question. So what is the level of fragmentation in terms of procedures, in terms of technologies that are deployed? What we are doing is this. We have a wide range of intervention with our activities, and we are trying to give an answer. So from a general point of view, the situation, there is level of integration, of harmonization at the UE level between member states. But there is always something that can be improved, that is necessary to improve with the new technologies, with new procedure. And this is what we are trying to support with our project. So I hope that with our activities, we will be able to indicate if the consensus at the EU level might be improved and in which way. So it is the work is never done when we come to emergencies. So we have never a perfect situation. We are learning on our everyday life today. We are not able to solve the situation. This every day the scenario is changing. The work is never done. So we are working. I hope that this can help address the answer at least.
Yeah, I think, yeah, thank you very much, Luigi, for your answer. Yeah, we are running much more than a bit out of schedule. So I would like to introduce you our next panel of speakers. We are going to have recent facts in art and emergencies. Our next speakers will be Rocchi and Cervone from INEA, and they are going to talk about the detection of radiation levels above the natural environmental background is the early warning of a radiological or nuclear emergency onset. But not always there is a clear link with the point of origin. We listened from Federico Rocchi about a puzzling case that happened this summer. Just to introduce you the speakers, Federico Rocchi, PhD, is the head of INEA Laboratory for the Safety of Nuclear Installations. He has been and currently is involved in nuclear, radiological and emergency preparedness and response. And Antonio Cervone, also PhD in nuclear engineering from University of Bologna. He currently works at the INEA in the Nuclear Security Division as a researcher. So they will share the slides by themselves since they have some surprises for us. So please, Antonio or Federico.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Federico Rocchi. Thank you, Rachele, for the introduction, and thank you, Luigi, for organizing the workshop. The presentation will be divided into two parts. The first is an introduction, and it will be given by me. And the second part, which will be devoted mainly on the specific case under scrutiny, will be given by Antonio Cervone. Next, please. Anomalous environmental radioactivity measurements. I would like to define what they are and give some kind of a framework about them. I will begin with what is an anomalous radioactivity, environmental radioactivity measurement. I can say that radioactive airborne material is detected from time to time in Europe by the monitoring networks. So it's something which happens from time to time. This can be either in terms of nucleic information, mainly concentrations of radionuclides in sampled air volumes, or dose rate information through alarms by the clear trespassing of typically high thresholds in terms of dose rates. These are two alternative ways of detecting an anomalous radioactivity measurement. The second is more dangerous and luckily, if not the case of what we are going to speak about later on. Why we speak about anomalous? Anomalous because these radioactivity measurements consist of artificial radionuclides, which can come from a different range of sources. They could be from spent nuclear fuel. They can come from the decommissioning activities of nuclear power plants. They can also come from the normal, natural, operational emissions from nuclear power plant. And they can also be anomalous emissions from nuclear power plants, or even other plants of the whole nuclear fuel cycle, from fuel manufacturing up to fuel reprocessing. They can come from plants from nuclear medicine. They can also come from inadvertent smelting of orphan sources or even malicious activities. So the main underlying theme here is artificial radionuclide, something which is not typically found in the natural background. Why again anomalous? Because the measured values that are measured are well above usual historical or typical backgrounds. Why I say typical backgrounds? Because there can be some artificial radionuclides which are present in the environment, like for example cesium-137, which comes from the 1986 Chernobyl accident. So this is an artificial radionuclide which is still, however, in our environment in typical backgrounds. When these usual or historical or typical backgrounds are trespassed, we speak of an anomalous measurement. Next, please. Then I would like to speak about who. Sometimes the origin and the source of the radioactive material is not made known for whatever reason. More often, the cause is instead declared quickly and promptly. So there can be both cases where we know what was the reason of this release, and sometimes we don't know the origin and the reason of that release. Then where I can say that many instances involve more than one country's measuring anomalous environmental radioactivity. And in many cases, we can speak of transboundary cases. In fact, we can imagine this airborne radioactive material being, let's say, spread over many neighboring countries, involving many nations, and many of these nations are unaware of what is happening in their neighboring countries. Then we should speak about when. Emissions may be concentrated in time or prolonged. Measurements, especially those containing the nucleic information, require a lot of time for completions, from a minimum of 1 day to a maximum of 7 days. And this means that there can be a long delay between the beginning of an anomalous event and the diagnosis and prognosis of the situation. Next, please. So all this sum up in what we can call hidden radioactive or nuclear emergencies. If anything unusual is being measured, in the absence of a declaration of responsibility, the precautionary assumption of alert must always be made. Therefore, questions must be answered very, very quickly, because we can be in a potential emergency. So these questions are: is there an ongoing emergency anywhere? Where precisely? When did it happen? Is it still happening? Of what type? And most importantly, can the situation worsen, and to which extent? Is there the need to do anything in my own country? And finally, should we inform the public, and how much, to which extent should we inform the public? This final question involves a lot of very difficult issues and problems, like that of transparency obligation by law, even by law in some countries, the right of people to be informed, and finally the need to distinguish between fake and the real news, which can be difficult in the current era of social media, where news are spread out at an extremely fast speed. Basically, a potential emergency or a hidden radiological nuclear emergency is like going through a kind of Gaussian shape. I don't know if you can see it in the slide. It's in the right lower corner. It's like going through a kind of Gaussian shape curve, and we don't know if you have already reached the maximum point of this curve or not yet. So basically, we are in a situation of potential emergency, and we need to understand what's going on and what to do. Next, please. The only way to try to answer the questions of the previous slide is to make analysis quickly and promptly. However, often measured data are not made public at all or disseminated, or they are disseminated only too late to be useful for these analysis. There may be various reasons behind this behavior, but if a situation worsens, those who have not shared measured data share, at least morally, part of the responsibility of badly implemented countermeasures in other countries and of their consequences. Many years ago, just after the Chernobyl accident, there has been the signature of an important international convention under IAEA, which is the International Convention on the Yearly Notification of the Nuclear Accidents, which asks the members to spread immediately through IAEA all the information they have about a radiological emergency or a nuclear emergency. Next, please. To this aim, I would like to make an example. In 2017, you may remember from the newspapers and media, there was a cloud of ruthenium-106 which spread all over Europe. And Italy in 2017 was the first nation to measure anomalous levels of ruthenium-106 in the atmosphere. Italy reacted extremely promptly and notified immediately IAEA of its own measurements, decided to publish immediately the measured data with no unnecessary decisional delay. Thanks to this, many measurement optimization strategies have been put in place in many European countries, allowing for a prompt reaction, because also measurement strategies need to be finely tuned for what's going on. Many countries later on officially declared or reinstated that in the case of a need, an emergency data should be published immediately. However, this happens today not to be always the case, and this brings us to the hidden emergencies that we analyzed last June. Basically, one morning, I received a phone call from our national nuclear regulatory authority, telling me that they had immediately received some measured data from monitoring networks and asked us, what's your opinion? What's going on? What should we do? And so in the remaining part of the presentations, which will be given by my colleague Antonio Cervone, we will show you our way of proceeding, our way of conducting this type of analysis from various points of view. And you will see that the main difference between the 2017 ruthenium case and the one which happened the past summer, there have been differences. In fact, data have been made available, but not with extreme, let's say, speed as it would be necessary. So the take-home message, at least from this my first introduction, is if you have measured data, please publish them as soon as possible. And then I pass the presentation to my colleague, who will explain you in more details the hidden anomaly of past summer.
Okay. So as Federico already stated, these anomalous measurements were registered during the month of June. What's important in this slide is to point out that none of these radioactive material that was released had any significant impact on public health, because the quantity was really small, so no problem on the health side. But nevertheless, it was an anomalous measurement. We can see in this slide the location of the laboratories that registered these measurements. Number 1 is Helsinki, and number 2 is Visby. Number 3 is Stockholm. Then we have number 4 and number 5 that are another location in Finland and one in Estonia. This is just a brief recalling of what were the measurements. Just to point out their spread in time. As you can see, there is only one measurement of ruthenium-106 in Visby, while we have many measurements of ruthenium-103 in all the locations that were shown on the map. Different cases for cesium. We can see we have measurements for cesium in all location, and also for cesium-134 and 137. Finally, another couple of measurements were about zirconium-95 and cerium-141. I have reported them because we will see that they can be used also for our analysis. So I will explain briefly, given the time. I will try to explain 3 main methodologies that we adopted to understand these measurements and try to recover their origin. So first of all, I will talk about the possibility to look at the isotopic ratios between different isotopes. In general, when many isotopes are released in the atmosphere, they are only subject to radioactive decay at that point, because there is no more production of them. And so in time, we can look at their the ratio of their concentration to understand how long it has passed between the shutdown of the reactor in the hypothesis that this isotope, this material is coming from a nuclear power reactor. And so we can look at this concentration, and especially at the ratios of the concentrations, to understand from how much time is passed between the shutdown and the measurement. This case was not, in this case, this approach was not successful, we can say, because as you can see in these two graphs, on the left, we can see the ratios between the two measurements of ruthenium isotopes that I showed us earlier. We can see that in this case, if the three curves represent three different cycles in the reactor, in the replenishment of the fuel inside the reactor. So let's say there are three conditions at which a reactor can be opened for some operation on the fuel assemblies. As you can see, for example, the green dots will highlight a period of time between the shutdown and the measurement. The isotopes, the ratio of the ruthenium would tell us that this interval of time is between 80 and 160 days. If we instead look at the couple of zirconium and cerium, the interval is completely different. It's between 0 and 22 days. So that's this is a problem, because the measurements do not give significant information to us in this case. We have to consider also that we are not taking into account just the measurement as itself, but we look also at the uncertainty on this measurement as it has been provided to us. So, and I would also like to point out, as Federico already said, that the case of cesium-137 is also more complex than the one that we are seeing here, because there is also the possibility of resuspension of cesium coming from Chernobyl. Okay, this is a list of possible emission sites that we have built a posteriori from the simulation that we will see later, just to show you that the type of reactor is mainly made by VVER and RBMK reactors. And this is the location that were listed earlier on a map. First of all, one way to look, another way to look at these enormous measurements is to look at the possibility to reconstruct the trajectory followed by the particles in the atmosphere. There are many ways to do this, many different approaches from the modeling side. And the one that I'm showing you here, the first one, is based on the trajectory of the air masses. This is a simplified approach in which not all the processes of the atmosphere are taken into account. In fact, in this case, we neglect turbulent effects, dispersion patterns specific of our particles, deposition, rain, and other phenomena. But this is very useful early because it's very fast. So we can have an idea on the origin of these particles or on the air masses, to be precise, in a few minutes, starting from the measurement. So we take the measurement, we move the air masses on top of the location of the measurement backwards in time and look from where this air masses is coming from. This is one example for the measurement coming from Helsinki. We can see that the trajectories that change from blue, that is the last point in time, to red, that is the first point in time, travel towards east and show us from which region the air mass has come from in order to reach Helsinki at the time of the measurement. Given the time, I will be very short on this. So this is one example for Helsinki. This is the same kind of simulation for Visby. The problem with Visby was that the measurements were very extended in time. So there were two measurements, and they were 1 week each. But to use such a long time would give us a large spread on the trajectories. So we reduced that a bit in order to get better trajectories. And this is the case of Stockholm. That also in this case we have to point out that since the measurement in Helsinki in Stockholm were in the week one from Helsinki and Visby, the time range for this measurement does not coincide. The time range of this simulation does not superimpose with the other ones. Furthermore, another approach is based on looking not only at the air masses but directly on the concentrations of our particles. If we do a backward concentration simulation, what we can get is maps of what is called source receptor sensitivity. That is a measure of the probability that a given point could be the source of the measurement that we have registered. In this case, we take into account all the processes in the atmosphere. So our model, that is also in this case a Lagrangian model, will take into account for all the processes that are part of our model. This gives higher accuracy with respect to the method that we have seen before, but the computational cost is quite higher. And in fact, one simulation of this type requires some hours when compared to the some minutes that are required for the other case. This is also useful if we have different measurements, as in this case, and we want to combine them. This is much easier done in this scenario than the one that we've seen before. So this is an example. I will show maybe a video about this. So in this case, for the measurement the measurement that was made in Helsinki, we will see that this probability cloud moves towards eastwards in the same areas that were affected by the backwards trajectories that we've seen before. And as you can see also, when we go further back in time, the cloud spreads everywhere, and the meaning starts to be less useful. This is the case for Visby. We can see also in this case the animation. In this case, as you can see, the cloud stays put near Visby for the first part of the simulation, and then starts moving eastwards, also in this case. And if we go over, this is in this case Stockholm. And you can see also in this case, the atmosphere, the winds in the atmosphere move the cloud eastwards. Okay, so what is important to see is that this approach qualitatively gives the same answer than the first one, the trajectory-based approach. What is important also is that we have much more information in this case. We can see not only the main trajectory, let's say the part where the cloud is higher in value, but also how it spreads around and what other regions are reached by the simulation. And also, what's also important is in this case the possibility to combine together the simulation. In this case, combining both simulation coming from Helsinki and the one coming from Visby to highlight the points that can only be a good candidate for both measurements, not only for one of them. And based on this simulation, we can also look at the likelihood for some selected points that are the points that are shown in the previous map. And also in this case, you can see the difference from the top one and the bottom one is that in this case, in the bottom one, we have used also the fact that there were not measurements, let's say, in other days different from the one when the measurements was reported. There was no measurements. This means that no radioactive material has reached that location on the other days. This is also an information that we can put in our simulation. So, and non-measurements is also an information that can be useful in our simulation. So I'll go to the conclusions. So we have seen different methods and different approaches to try to reconstruct a possible source and a possible location for an hidden radioactive hazard like this one that does not have a precise location that is known. So what we have seen is that this simulation can clearly identify a broad region of space, but they cannot identify a single location, as was the case for the ruthenium case in 2017. This is due to the fact that the information that we have used in this case are not as good as they can be. In fact, measurements to be useful when applied to this workflow, they should be, as I listed here, collected in short time periods, if possible. They should be on the same days. Maybe if the best case is that they are spread apart, so they are influenced by different kind of weather and atmosphere conditions, so that they can travel differently from one another. That is not the case in this case, as you can see, as you have seen in the original picture. All the locations for these measurements are quite close to one another. And also it's important to have a well-defined uncertainty on these measurements. That is important for the isotopic ratios that we have seen earlier. So this case is not a good one for these approaches, but nevertheless, some information can be recalled from these workflows that we have seen. So that's all on the slide. I will just remind you that on the last slide there is a link where you can download the full report on this analysis that we have made, that is publicly available. So if you want more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Federico, for your kind presentation. I will ask to Antonio to please copy and paste the website.
Yes,
on the slide, on the chat, so yes, everyone will be able to go there and have a look at it.
Sure.
So our next speaker will be Spiros, Captain Spiros Kolovos. He will talk about major explosions always come with an imperative. Did they intentionally or unintentionally involve radiological material? And we learn from Captain Kolovos of the Hellenic Ministry of Defense what are the procedures in place at the national and international level to deal with this scenario. Captain Spiros Kolovos joined Greek Navy in 1987. He served for 3 years in NATO, joined CBRN Defense Center of Excellence, dealing with CBRN concepts and doctrines. Then in 2016, he was assigned to Hellenic National Defense General Staff, and he is now responsible for the CBRN defense issues in national and international level, as well the cooperation with respective civilian authorities. Please, Captain Kolovos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm military and also participate to included project as Work Package 5 leader, dealing with Joint Actions organization. So next slide, Raquel. So the aim of the presentation is to as explained on the title, is to provide the official procedures when we're dealing with a major blast, which includes radiological material, what the responsible authorities will do in national and international level. I will provide what we do in Greece and also the procedures for European Union and NATO. Next. So first of all, I will present to you the International Atomic Agency directions, which also we follow. These directions are divided in two phases. It's the preparation phase, as you see on the slide. Summarize this procedure, these directions, is to establish an organizational structure, to make a threat assessment of the incident or the blast what we are talking about, to strengthen the physical protection of RM material, deploy the detection instruments, and to be prepared for the response. Next slide. And the second phase is the execution phase, which the International Atomic Energy directs what is the proposed command and control structure. It's divided in 4 levels. The policy level, then strategic, operational, and finally the tactical level. And as you see, first the policy level make the decisions, giving to the next level, which is the strategic, which is a high-level body, and provide advice. It's you can see, it's interaction. These two levels, the strategic get direction and also provide advice in order to find the best solution. and then this. No, Raquel, I didn't finish. And then it's from the strategic level provide orders to operational level, which is a group of experts who provide technical advice. To the tactical level, which is the final level, means the first responders and all the incident personnel. So next slide. Now we go to what we do in national level when we have a major blast with radiological material. It's we activate the consequence management mechanism, then develop a supporting management team, and the next activation is the incident coordination element, which it's a body with representatives from all services dealing with this incident, so that we have the best the best results and the best action. And you can see also these elements' responsibilities in summary, which is risk assessment, the zones mapping, the planning, strategic and operational planning for the tactical one, the implementation of the plans, the risk management, logistics, and the rest of activities like logistics, protection of population, and information to the mass media and the public. Next slide. So in Greece, we combined the policy and strategic level In one, it's the strategic level because the civil protection, the General Secretariat for Civil Protection has also the policy level and make also the decisions to what we do. So after that is the operational and then the tactical level, including, as I explained, all authorities in accordance also with the directions of the National Atomic Energy Agency. Next slide. And here I prepared a diagram to see more clear what is the structure. When we have on the top a major blast and the activation of different bodies, and on the bottom you can see all the authorities, including the armed forces, which we have established civil military framework for cooperation in order to provide as much as possible assets to support the population, especially on CBRN incident. On the right, you can see there is also the crisis management team. It's on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's for reporting the situation abroad and to know the neighboring countries about the situation and to make measures for their populations. Next slide. And I finished with Greek procedures. Now we continue with European Union procedures. And the European Union is the civil protection mechanism which developed the Emergency Response Coordination Center, the ERCC. This body has the coordination when there is a major a disaster, including blast, and coordination all the EU member states, the participating states, including the UK. Next slide. So here also for EU is the process, how it's going step by step. When we have a confirmation of a radiological event, the member states adequate response means, then the integrated political crisis response is activated, and all the teams, the Frontex, Council, Commission, make a meeting to organize the next steps, the next actions, and then go to the tactical level, which is the deployment of teams through the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, and also there is exchange of information from the member states with Europol and EU Intelligence Analysis Center. Next slide. So regarding the military contribution to this center, which as military, I think it's very pure, and I'm also trying to show that the armed forces can provide more support to civilian and for the populations, especially on CBRN defense domain. And this is from EU perspective, is the support is related to medical treatment of casualties, the psychological care, the assessment of external contamination of victims, large influx, and the assessment of contamination in the environment, and the contamination of victims, buildings, and the atmosphere. Next slide. So here you can see from this center it is prepared diagram, how it works, this mechanism. Everything you can find on the bottom of the slides. It's there is a link for where you can find more information. Next slide. And also from this, I took a recent picture from this sender, providing the assets that the EU countries provide to the ERCC, and on the red cycled pictures, you can see what countries provide CBRN assets to the sender. Next slide. So for also recently there was support from EU to the Beirut explosion, but mostly the Lebanese government asked for rescue and rescue teams, and only from Italy it was provided a CBRN team for detection issues. And some a summary of the sender, what it was the process, the steps were followed during after the explosion. And, you can see that the government asked first the United Nations, and then the civil protection mechanism of EU activated to support the Lebanese government. But for this incident, I think the next presentation is more detailed. I just provided what the center is doing and how it works. So next. And some words about the NATO procedures as military. There is also another center. It's the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center, which is also was established also for support of the NATO and partner countries. And as NATO provides military assets to the affected areas. Next slide. And here you can see in a table that now NATO has created a checklist just to provide as much as possible information in order to the appropriate forces can be prepared effectively and go to the affected area. You can see it's request, description, assistance, terms of condition, mechanisms of cooperation. Next slide. There are also specifications what the affected country has to explain for everything, for command and control, coordination with the United Nations, for Red Cross, NGOs, and the security of the teams. Next slide. And here you can see also the respective, like EU, the diagram how this center it works for support, and especially on CBRN incidents, and also natural disasters. And now I finish my presentation, and on the final slide you can find the references to. You can see more details if you are interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spiros. Our next presenters will be D'Angelo, Bogo, and Gloria. On 4th of August 2020, a mass explosion took place in the port of Beirut. We listened from Dr. D'Angelo, Colonel Bogo, and Lieutenant Colonel Gloria, their experience in the immediate aftermath of the event. So Andrea D'Angelo is the president of SAFE and team leader of EUTA, project manager and project director for over 100 large EU-funded TA projects, while Emmanuel Bogo is key expert for Project 73 and former French Gendarmerie CBRN national advisor. And Andrea Gloria is also key expert 3 for EUTA project. Lieutenant Colonel Gloria's career broadening experience of on international exercises, activities, and operations mainly focused on CBRN defense. Please, the floor is yours. I don't know who is going to start.
Emmanuel?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm Andrea Gloria. I'm waiting Emmanuel Bucco joining also. Is the first starting speaking because Andrea D'Angelo is absent. Is just confirmed now that he's busy with another meeting is still ongoing. So Emmanuel Bucco, if he's online, he will start, and then we will do together this presentation. 1 second. Okay, he has a problem in the connection, so I will start. Okay, Rachele?
Please go on, Andrea.
Okay. So next, please. Okay, this is not my project, but key expert Emmanuel Bucco is responsible for this project that is focused on critical infrastructures in Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon. In particular, is responsible for Lebanese part. As you can see, after the explosion, he assessed the chemical and radiological risks in the Grand Seral, that is the palace of the government, and to protect the Lebanese chain of command. So they carried out surveys inside the building of the Grand Seral and using the equipment donated under the project. Also, they put here a picture about the clouds. Of course, after the explosion, there was a huge cloud for the many chemical substances released after the event. And also there were other aspects analyzed from the project team in the situation inside the Grand Seral. Next, please. Concerning my project technical assistant, we coordinated several activities with the Lebanese armed forces, but also with for teams from abroad, as the previous speaker emphasized. With the civil protection mechanism, there is a possibility to send also European teams abroad in case of huge events. And in this case, in Lebanon, we received many CBRN teams from European countries. But starting with the immediate response, the CBRN company of the Lebanese armed forces that we are training in the technical assistant project, after more or less 4 hours, they carried out a survey using chemical and radiological detector devices. And just to give you a picture, was very complex to reach the area of the blast for the presence of metals that destroy all the tires of the vehicles, and everything was meshed with the soil, with the material on the ground. But in any case, they carried out these activities, so was in some way was positive for us to see how they put in practice all the procedures learned in the project, and they didn't find any radiations on the spot. Also, they did sampling activities for safety and forensic purposes afterwards. Next, please. And for the short-term operational response, in the Grand Seral, this is another slide from the 273, they assess the radiological risks for the damaged equipment inside the government palace, and also they provided psychological sessions to the employees inside the building. Then you can see some pictures about the activities ongoing there in that period. We are speaking about the first weeks after the explosion. Next, please. Back to the technical assistant, as I said, we received the support from the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. The first support was from a Siberian team of firefighters and army from Italy. They carried out from the 6th to 12th of August radiological and chemical surveys. They confirmed the absence of any radiations, and this was very good in reference to fake news that were going around, basically telling that there was tactical nuclear weapons used or something like this. So this was useful to have this official report from also European side to confirm the absence of radiations. At that time, we started also to collect many evidence and many a list of chemical substances, and nowadays we have more or less 20-30 main chemicals that are still stored in the port for the waste management, and with the European Union we are planning also the future operation on these matters. For the radiation, as I said, nothing was reported. Next, please. And we received another support from a task force from Italy with a Siberian team. At one point, there were two task forces on the port, one from Italy and another from France. So the port has been divided in two areas. The Italian task force has also a Siberian team, and still now they are carrying out activities, so radiations monitoring and also chemical check. You can see also in the bottom of the slide, they are carrying out also sampling activities for asbestos and for pollutants. The big issue now during the removal of the ruins is the high presence of asbestos in the area. Next. And just in conclusion concerning the P73, so as a medium-term operational response, so there are ongoing several activities to restore the capacity of the Grand Serail, including the issues related to the current COVID-19 pandemic. So under the P73 project, also with after the request from the Lebanese government, the project team started a sort of identification of main critical infrastructures in Lebanon with huge quantities of chemicals stored. Here, the safety and security measures are very low, and so there are still ongoing these activities to guarantee maximum security and safety for this kind of material. Next. So this concludes my presentation. So I improvised also the part of my colleague. So I hope everything was clear. The floor is yours, Rachele.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. Everything was really clear. So thank you very much for your kind presentation and also for taking the part of your colleagues. So for this question and answer session, I would like to highlight that Antonio Cervone posted the link of the report written by INEA, and also Antonella Cavallo from DG Eco posted a very interesting link from DG Eco, and so I think it's very relevant. So now the floor is open for any kind of questions. I don't know, otherwise I do have a question. For Andrea Gloria, and my question is, are there any training related to RN aspects in the project 73 that you are carried out there? I mean, is RN also included in these training sessions?
Yes, so we in both projects, so the P73 and also on my project, the technical assistance, there are several trainings from basic, intermediate, and advanced. Just to give you an example, we just finished an advanced training for under the technical assistant project. This training was was focused on teaching to the agencies internally to the Lebanese armed forces. So we are speaking about military police, military intelligence, cyber and company, and the military hospital, how to react in case of radiological events. So starting from the basics of radiations, measurements, the calculations of those, exercises, protection principle, medical measures, so everything. And mainly we are working to make them working all together. So to develop SOPs, in this case for radiations events, but radioactive events, but also for all the others. So we are working also with firefighters, police, civil defense, and other entities, just to make them working together in a coordinated response.
Many thanks, Andrea, for this answer. Very, very interesting. So we are going to close our workshop with this interesting contribution from Dr. Marzo on how assets and capabilities in their RN domain may be of help in countering COVID-19. Dr. Marzo in the last 10 years worked as a researcher on destructive and non-destructive characterization of radioactive materials and radioactive waste, in particular dealing with gamma spectrometry, alpha spectrometry, and neutron active interrogation. Is currently the head of the ENEA Nuclear Material Characterization Lab. So, Dr. Marzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rachele. Thank you, Luigi, and for an invitation. And good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
May I ask you to talk a bit louder? Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to get the mic close. First of all, I would like to warn you that I see two issues related to this presentation. First is that I am a physicist out of the field of expertise. Therefore, please accept my apologies for any wrong term I might use in this particular field. The second is that this research field is growing really fast given the current pandemic context. Therefore, even if this presentation is based on literature of the last few weeks, it might be already old. So in the presentation, I'll try to briefly illustrate you some specific example of what the RN expertise can do in support of the pandemic emergency response. Next slide, please. Okay, so the starting point is the shortage of personal protective equipment, PPE, that we all experienced during the COVID-19 outbreak. Why did happen this? So let's have a look on the plot on the right. This is a nice example from UNICEF. It represents the annual procurement of PPE through UNICEF. If you look at the purple and yellow bars, you can easily convince yourself of the immense difference of face masks demand in 2020 with respect to the previous years. That basically was non-existent. So this excess of PPE and the consequent shortage caused two important problems. So the need for reprocessing PPE for using and the huge amount of contaminated items to be safely disposed. So what's the obvious solution? The solution is to sterilize or at least disinfect them. And we see later in the presentation what this terminology means exactly. So next slide, please. Okay, what are the PPE I'm talking about? They are mainly caps, goggles, respiratory masks, of course, face shields, gowns, and gloves, of course, and shoe cover. And this is valid for the medical personnel, while surgical masks, respiratory masks, and gloves are for the general population. Next one, please. Okay, what are the treatment options that have been investigated so far? And they are several. Some of them gave mixed results, in particular those dealing with high temperature in moist condition or aggressive chemicals. And ultraviolet radiation, for example, that been studied, but has limitation when it comes to areas in shadows where UV are not effective at all. So the most straightforward solution is using ionizing radiation. However, the main drawback is that the necessary equipment may not be ready available for everyone. So they need appropriate licenses and qualified operators to be done. And of course, this might be an obstacle. Next slide, please. Okay, sterilization, of course, is not new. Sterilization by using ionizing radiation is very common for new medical items, of course. It's been being introduced in the 50s and is currently regulated by several ISO standards. And I list some of them here for convenience. On the contrary, sterilization on already used items with the aim of reusing or disposing these items is not well studied nor documented, and it is of extreme interest today for the reason we already saw. In fact, in many countries is currently open research projects for in this topic. So next slide, please. Okay, as evidence, I want to show you a survey made by IAEA in March 2020, just a few weeks after the virus spread out of China. On 49 survey participating countries, already 25 of them, more than 50% basically, there were already research projects on radiation processes of PPE, specifically related to COVID-19. If you look at the map, the blue countries were already involved in research about irradiation of PPE. Not only China, as obvious, because it was experienced the outbreak, but also some European country already. Next one, please. Okay, I talked about sterilization and disinfection. What are they? Traditionally, a parameter is called T10, tabulated, and is the dose amount needed to kill 90% of the microorganism population, and its classic threshold is 2 kilogray. And this is valid for the majority of bacterial viruses, as you can see on the right. Sterilization means 9 log 10 reduction in the microorganism population. That means 1 microorganism out of 1 billion survives, while disinfection is less strict and is defined as 6 log 10 reduction. That means 1 microorganism out of 1 million is expected to survive the disinfection process. It is important to note that at this point that all the available data are referred to gamma radiation from cobalt-60, therefore referred to photon energy slightly higher than 1 MeV, 1 mega electron volt. Yet very low amount of data are out of there related to different radiation types. And this is something I would like to point out, and we come to this concept later. Next one, please. Okay, the following results, the results I'm going to present you in a few seconds, are based on the most significant irradiation experiment carried out so far, and are reported in the literature, and in particular in a very interesting IAEA technical report, which is about to be published, and I put the link in the bottom of the page. As you can note, all of them are based on cobalt-60, gamma irradiation, and electron irradiation. The electron radiation have energies between 6 and 10 mega electron volts. Next one, please. Okay, all the different research groups found that used PPE, such as aprons, goggles, and face screens, are suited both for sterilization and disinfection, since they not show any significant changes after irradiation. The only minor exception are some residual smell, due possibly to oxidation, and some reduction in their medical strength. The conclusion is that this PPE can be safely reused after irradiation, and this is good news. Next one, please. No, there should be another one before. Okay. More complex actually is the outcome of the experiments performed on face masks, in particular the FFP2, which is N95, depends on the standard name, and FFP3 masks. Here we have some smell problems, of course, like the other PPE, and some color changes, which of course do not affect their functionalities, but very important, they experience a reduction in the filtration efficiency. And let's see exactly how the filtration efficiency is affected by irradiation. Next one, please. Okay, here the results from 2 independent research groups are shown. On the left, a report from CA in France shows that the filtration efficiency goes down from 99%, which is a standard filtration for FFP3 or FFP2 masks, to nearly 60% 4 particles with a diameter larger than 200 nanometers. Therefore, a very significant drop. Basically, they are useless. On the other plot on the right, the results from a research carried out by a Chinese group, independent from the first, of course. Here, in each group of histograms, the 4 bars on the left are masks not irradiated, while the other bars indicate the filtration efficiency on the same masks after irradiation. Again, you can easily convince yourself that the filtration efficiency drops significantly after irradiation, but why is that? Next one, please. I mentioned before that there are no structural changes and no chemical changes after irradiation, and I report here some evidence. On the left, SEM pictures at 2 different magnifications of the mask's fabric, before irradiation and after irradiation at 30 kilogray and 60 kilogray, and there are no visible changes. On the right, an example of Fourier transform infrared spectra of the mask's fabric before and after irradiation. In this case, there are no significant changes too, meaning that molecular composition is basically the same. So why is the filtration efficiency lost? Next one, please. Okay, to look for an explanation of the filtration efficiency drop, let's have a look at the structure of the fabric, the mask fabrics itself. So the FFP2 or FFP3 masks, which is the same basically in this case, they are made out of different type of polypropylene fabric. Each layer has a thickness from 100 to 1,000 micrometers, and each fiber a diameter from 1 to 10 micrometers, basically. The resulting configuration still has air permeability. So the trick to make them work is to electrostatically charge the fibers or use quasi-permanent dipoles, which are called electrets. In this way, particles passing through the mask are trapped by electrostatic charge. Unfortunately, radiation destroys the electrets and therefore let the larger particles pass through the masks and making them useless. Next one, please. Okay, so what we know so far. We know that the radiation is able to kill microorganisms at the same time preserving the properties of the irradiated PPE. There is evidence that medical protective clothing can be reused after irradiation, and this is good news. Experiments provide evidence that irradiated surgical and respiratory masks can be effectively sterilized or disinfected. Unfortunately, irradiation of respiratory masks shows that a big drop in the filtration efficiency. And this is a very important exception. But I would like to point out again that it's important to note that little is known about the sterilization or disinfection abilities of different types of radiation so far. Next one, please. So as an example, neutrons. Neutrons are very penetrating, and they are known to produce more biological damages than gamma or electrons. Neutrons have several pros, such the possibilities of requiring a lower dose for sterilize, and they can sterilize large volumes. They can be treated at the same time, given the penetration ability of neutrons. The most obvious drawbacks is that usually a nuclear reactor is needed to perform irradiation with a significant dose. Clearly, a nuclear reactor is not something you can find everywhere, and it sounds quite expensive. So next one, please. Okay, at this point, let me show very briefly what we plan to do in ENEA. We propose to study the biological effects of neutrons at different doses and energies on some microorganisms in our research reactors. We have 2 research reactors. One is a 1 megawatt trigger for thermal neutrons, and Tapiro, another nuclear reactor, for fast neutrons. Fast here means that the energy distribution of neutrons is centered at 1 megaelectron volt. If the project will be funded, we plan to irradiate also SARS-CoV-2 virus by means of a partnership with a medical research group authorized to manipulate the virus, of course. So this actual research will be directly related to COVID-19 pandemic. Next one, please. Along with the neutron radiations, we plan to perform also gamma radiation on the same samples, first of all to reproduce other groups' results that are already present in the literature, and then for comparing gamma and neutron radiation effects. The last step, the most important one, would be to investigate the possibility to scale down the radiation process and adopt much cheaper and portable neutron generators instead of nuclear reactors for reapplications such as sterilization, for example. Next one. Okay, thank you for your attention. Stay safe. I give the floor back to Rachele. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Marzo. And well, we are approaching the end. So let me reshare my screen. And yeah, we had feedbacks and perspectives. So I will leave the floor to Luigi now. That will just take us deeper in this.
Thank you, Rachele. And so thanks to all the speakers and thanks to all the participants to this first annual workshop in online modality. So obviously the feedback, my first feedback is that I'm proud to be the coordinator of such high class level experts in the sector. So including, I think is giving a very important contribution at European level to raise the awareness how much is complex the prevention and response to radiological and nuclear emergencies. So we have had a lot of alarm bells during the presentation. One from Franca Padovani. Franca clearly stated that the attention on nuclear security is decreasing, is diminishing, and obviously this is not good for an international level. We have had an alarm bells from Professor Daniele, from Professor Gui. The hospital are not training as they should to prepare to radiological and nuclear emergencies. And so this is this is a gaps, an important gaps that the project has highlighted and that we need to address, that we propose to the member state to address. We have had from Federico Rocchi the alarm bells that something happens and we don't know from it comes from. Something, there are heavens, hidden heavens during which there are a diffusion of radiological contamination in the environment, and that there is not the necessary transparency somewhere on what is really happening to put in place the measures. We have had from Armenia how much it's difficult to deal with the radiological crime scene. This is important because if something happened, the prosecution phase is very, very important to establish the exact responsibilities and so on. We have had from Capitan Kolovos from Spiros, what are the different approach at a European level, NATO level, and the national level when to deal with essentially a scenario with a big radiation, with the blast involving radiation material. And so it is important that some differences could be, there is still a fragmented approach at these three different levels. We have had a very good example from Gloria, from SAFE, about the project in Lebanon, how much have been effective the intervention of European institutions and organizations like SAFE to assess on the field in the immediate aftermath of the explosion in Lebanon if some radiological material was involved. Finally, we have had a very nice presentation of Giuseppe Marzo. That is an alarm bell itself. So because we are not, it's not clear if the mask that we are wearing are effective in protecting us or not. So the workshop has, in my opinion, met the scopes that was to work the hot iron. Today we have been working the hot iron of these topics like nuclear security, medical aspects, radiological crime scene management, and the fragmentation in the strategic level, operative level, and so on. So obviously we will have the next workshop on June 2021 in Athens. We hope in physical presence. It will be open to external stakeholders, so we will be more than happy to host all the distinguished partners from external to the project that have participated today. And so please give us feedback in order for us to organize at the best this event. The floor is open if someone would like to add comments, so you are welcome. We are an open forum.
Just many thanks, and you did a very good work. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. So I cite this opportunity to thank once again the speakers and the three main organizers, Rachele for excellent job in coordinating these days, and Monica Cinino and Monica Banasex for organizing all the logistic part of the event.
Luigi, I will retake the floor just to say that we have a questionnaire, as I said in the beginning. So if you do not wish to share with us your view now, please do it visiting the questionnaire. You can just take a picture with your phone, and you will be you will go directly on the questionnaire, or the questionnaire will be sent to you by tomorrow. I would like to thank Luigi for the excellent job he did, and for giving us the possibility to organize this workshop, and for coordinating our work, and for doing this, and for accepting to doing this for these 5 years. So thank you very much. This is our context, and I just posted this picture here from the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, just to remember when we were all together, and hoping that we will be all together again very soon in this year or in the next year. Thank you very much, all of you speakers, participants, Luigi, and my colleagues who helped me in organizing this workshop.
Thank you, Raquel. Final advice: all the material will be available. So the slides and the video of this this event will be available on the project website very soon. The time to elaborate the material and to upload it on the project website. Okay. I think that's all, and I wish all a nice afternoon, nice evening, and obviously stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Luigi. Bye.